I'm going to read a poem called The Mask.
If you would like the mic to have it.
Oh, okay.
Hello?
All right. The Mask. When I win, I think I'm lucky. Never earned it. The Mask. The Mask. When I win, I think I'm lucky. Never earned it. I can't believe anything good in me. There is a constant period test of selflessness in my brain chatter from 30 years ago to this day. From that cult, the one that was supposed to be a youth group. Empathy at first, then comes the needing of the constant loving discipline, rebukes, confrontation, repentance demands. Repentance I thought that meant a change of heart, but it was a change your tone. Forgiveness there will be, with unconditional loving discipline, through several gossip juries and trials by judges with hunches and nepotism robes, discussing what we can still bring to the table. If others see good in me, I believe I have to see. I think they did this to us kids in there, us kids from that cult, the one that was supposed to be a youth group. They convinced us kids that we deceived them, that we deceived ourselves, that we deceived our loved ones outside about who we really were, those of the world who spoke of familiar kindness, a kindness we had forgotten, a kindness of rest, who missed a way for us to return to them, that we had to let go of to save the world. We spoke of only evangelical verses and practiced debate. They convinced us kids that they know the real us, the sinner us, the selfish sinner us, the ever so awful, hurtful us that needs to get back in line us from that cult, the one that was supposed to be a youth group. To stop listening to the poets outside, to those who miss and wait. We hide our unhappiness to protect them so they don't turn away from God because of our bad witness. I think they did this to us kids in there. Us kids from that cult, the one that was supposed to be a youth group. They thought we were theirs. They convinced us we hurt them. We break their hearts by leaving. We break their hearts for making them have to ghost us, excommunicate us in front of everyone. A show of the example because we just got tired. We just became a Winston. We just started a hero's journey off their track and never knew it until we heard each other. I believe all the good in me is an illusion. My selfishness is absolute. That I had to give God back on my way out the very door I came in. You can't take God with us once we leave. No matter the exit, that cult, the one that was supposed to be a youth group. The shunning, their disappointed, hurt faces follow us in our dreams, decades after. Nightmares of our broken hearts like it was just yesterday. They used God to hurt people there. So I share it to spare others the trauma I carry from 30 years ago to this day, from that cult, the one that was supposed to be a fucking youth group.
I'm going to explain how the rules go. We're going to do a panel discussion where we have an opportunity as the community, you as the community get an opportunity to ask questions of some people that have decided, along with 43 others, that they're no longer anonymous. No. In the 50-year history of Xenos and Dwell, since the very beginning there have been issues, and during that time, There have been other people within the realm of the universal Christian church that have attempted to say, hey, this isn't really how this stuff is done. And it's fallen on deaf ears. And things are still happening that have happened in the past. And at this point, we trust Reverend Raphael and the counter-cult experts to manage them. At this point, we want to inform the community. Since they are in a position right now where they are not seeing the need to make an adjustment, then the community needs to be aware of the experience. And each person up here with a sign is willing to give their name and to talk about their experience. And these particular people are willing to do this for you in this venue tonight. Also, I ask that you just direct the questions to me, and the panel will decide if they answer. And additionally, if you have questions that you don't want to ask out loud, at the end of the pew there are some Post-it notes. You're welcome to jot down something, and if you have a question or if somebody hands you a question, hand it to the end and someone will grab it and bring it up and we'll take care of it. You can also ask questions on the Facebook Live link. I'll have that rolling here so that we can answer questions from there as well, if that's helpful. The only other thing I ask is that in the event that anybody is inappropriate in this venue, we will ask you to leave. It's not going to be, this is an issue where we hope to just make an informed statement about the impact and we give you some tips about how to protect yourself and your children. But we are not going to allow anything like doxing people, yelling at people, harassing people outside of here based on this situation and what we're doing here. This is for the healing of the individuals that I love, that are my friends for the last 5 years. And it's also for healing the community and allowing people to have safe and good religious experiences. So without further ado, we're going to start with an opening round where each person here is going to say their name. And my name is Julie McLaughlin. And I'm a survivor of Dwell, Xenos. The years that I attended Dwell in Xenos are between the years of 1982 and 1993. And the reason that I'm not anonymous now, and I have been anonymous, the reason I'm not anonymous now is the same things are happening now that happened when I was there. People are hurt the exact same ways. Nothing has adjusted, nothing has changed. My very first day of seminary in my 40s, I walked into the bathroom and there was a young woman and she was laid out in the handicapped stall crying because she got yelled at, because she was late. She was out a half an hour past curfew. This is an adult woman in graduate school. And on her first day of seminary, she's crying because her roommates woke up early to confront her. And as I sat on the floor on my first day of seminary crying with somebody from Xenos, I'm like, 15 years later, nothing's changed. And here we are now, 30 years later. And similarly, nothing has changed. But there's still a desire. I love people that are there. I learned a lot there. But they don't. But at this point, I'm not anonymous because these folks have legitimate care and concern. And these folks need a voice. I need a voice. And we're going to continue to talk and protect our community. And hopefully we'll gather back our brothers and sisters at some point.
My name is Candace Bean, formerly Kane. I was in Xenos from 2010, high school sophomore, until 2018. or 2019. It's all kind of a blur. The reason I'm not anonymous is because the baggage that I carry from 7-8 years in the church, post-traumatic stress disorder, a legitimate diagnosis, and eating disorders from the trauma that they've caused, from the rules that they put on me, again, a grown adult woman, or even as a minor, which is not their place. I want to protect everyone in this city from experiencing that trauma and having to carry that baggage. It might get easier to carry, but it will never go away.
My name is Sam Tryans. I'm a survivor of Xenos. I have been a member from 2000, when I was about 6 years old, to 2008, 2009, when I was a young high schooler, 14. The reason that I'm not anonymous is that awareness is the first step towards change. And I want to do everything I can to help children and families escape the mistreatment I experienced. I have a personality disorder as a result of being raised in the church, and Xenos robbed me of my father, whom I have no relationship with to this day. Religion should give you joy and comfort, and not fear and shame.
My name is Susan Curry, and I am a Xenos World survivor. I was a member from 2001, from the age of 9 years old to 2015. I was in the Galashmet Home Church, the Matthews Home Church, and Deacon Andy's Home Church, and I am not anonymous today because I am taking my voice back. Victim-blaming sexual assault survivors killed. Mental health is real, including anorexia nervosa, needs proper treatment, and gay conversion therapy does not work, particularly when it's done on minors.
My name is Megan James, formerly Megan Houchins. I'm a survivor of being born into the Fish House in 1997 and leaving Xenos Christian Fellowship when I was 16 years old. I'm not anonymous because the things that I experienced 35 and 40 years ago are the same experiences that young adults and children are having today at Xenos and Dwell and in their affiliated programs and schools. I am continually shocked by both how unprepared for and lied to about the world and life in general that Xenos prepared me for. I too have struggled with anorexia nervosa, not as a result of body image, but as a result of the deep, soul-deep anxiety that I have suffered from since I first became suicidal in the 3rd grade at Calumet, as a direct result of the disciplinary actions that my teachers took. I'm not anonymous because the way that they treat children is no different from the way that they treat young adults and college students and grown adults. And when that trauma occurs, it causes both physical and emotional lifelong damage to children. It impacts the way your brain structures develop. I am not anonymous because I am a direct rebuttal witness to things that the church has declared never, ever, ever, never took place. And I'm not anonymous because there are still hundreds, if not thousands, of children out there stuck in the churn.
My name's Oliver Long. I'm not anonymous because my sister moved in with us after a failed marriage with one of Dennis's disciples and lived with us for 3 years and helped me look back on the time in my life where I was in Xenos. And I'm not anonymous because I've got 2 kids now, and I cannot imagine my children being pressured on who to love and who not to love, who to reach out to, who to date, who to ultimately marry, where to go to school, where to live, how many people to live with, what vocation they ultimately ought to desire. Those are all decisions that I, along with many other leaders, helped make for people there. And I can't imagine as a father looking at my children and doing the same thing, taking their volition away from them, taking their decisions ultimately on who they would want to be and how they would want to live away from them. That's why I'm not anonymous.
We're going to have Reverend Raphael share his investigation. So we'll bring him in. And then we'll be taking the discussion questions after. So you can be thinking about that as he speaks, okay?
Can you hear us? Sharon?
Yes, can you hear me?
We can.
I can hear you.
We've just given you a glowing introduction.
Great.
So go ahead and speak.
Thank you very much. Let me just turn something down here. In order to watch the service that was going on to this point, I had my desktop over there on, I had to turn it down, so it's a little reverbed in here. Thank you for the opportunity to say something into the darkness. I appreciate Blue Ocean's hosting of this, and I do appreciate so many of you who have come out and have decided to not be anonymous. You decided you're going to take your voices back, and you decided you're not going to be still any longer. And I got involved back in 2021, and that's just a blink away, but it's been like several lifetimes for me personally. I was doing the rap on the HBO series I'm most well known for concerning the Remnant Fellowship Cult. I was moving on to develop a pilot for another series. I was going to take an episodic view of a variety of different cults. And Xenos was the first one that we selected to work with. And then afterwards, I started doing more work for another group in Cincinnati called the Gladstone Movement, which is basically a snot kid brother of Xenos as far as I'm concerned. But we won't tarry there. The point is that from that point on, I spent a whole week beginning with Desiree, in learning what Xenos was about, in hearing and speaking and traveling and listening and asking questions and being taught of what this movement is about. And as horrified as it was, it just at the same time wasn't surprising. Because religious abuse such as this is as age-old as the fall of Eden. It's something that religious abuse is a trauma that's suffered by members of communities whose leaders deceptively use manipulative teaching and practice to abusively compel the behavior they want out of their members by controlling their thoughts, no matter what the personal cost they have. And this is what's going on in a variety of different groups for generations, for ages. The orthodoxy that they might put on, the doctrinal soundness that they might emanate, is something that's completely undercut by the cruelty, the carnality, and the authoritarian manner in which they carry themselves behind closed doors. There's what I call a hidden curriculum, a very, very, very well-concealed agenda that they use to operate in a way that controls people to their detriment, not to their blessing, not to their edification, but to their destruction. And religious abuse thrives, I have found, over the past 2 to 3 decades of work in this field. Religious abuse thrives in silence. It thrives when it's unnoticed. It thrives when it can cover itself and color itself as something else other than what it is. It's a silence that's empowered by shame and sexism and just shag nastily, vicious treatment of people. The ultimate test of true spirituality, if you accept the Christian revelation as any kind of guideline, which I, as a Christian man, certainly do, is found in 1 Corinthians 13, where love is described as the alpha and the omega of true faith. And every cult I've ever known violates that so thoroughly. And Xenos/Well is of no exception at all. The things that we have heard, that we've talked to people about, which are owned by everyone that has just presented here, are certainly more than ample testimony to just how morally corrupt the organization that Xenos and Well is. It doesn't matter at this point how sound their doctrine is, whether they support the confession or not, where they believe in the Chicago Declaration of Biblical Inerrancy. It doesn't matter. Jesus has said many, many times, those who hate their brothers are murderers. He said that through the mouth of his apostle John. If you hate your brother, you're a murderer. Your faith means nothing. And that kind of murderous, abominable treatment that people I've been hearing routinely get served by the so-called elders of Xenos is pure proof of that. And I'm not going to belabor the point, because this evening is not for me to say much more, but I can tell you that the Bible makes it very clear. And I'm not going to preach. I'm a preacher. I can do that, but I'm not going to. If you read Ezekiel chapter 30, 34, Acts chapter 20, from Old and New Testament, you will see the indictments of Yahweh against those who lead his people who are abusive. And Paul warned for 3 years the Ephesian elders he personally trained to be careful of who was going to rise among them to draw away disciples after themselves. He didn't say anything about changing doctrine. He said they're going to pursue them personally. And this is exactly what religious abuse is. We want to look at it from a spiritual perspective. We will also look from the testimonial. And that's what we're going to be getting into right now. And I guess tonight, and that's what we're here for, we're going to hear how Xenos is a contemporary example of an abusive cult that is as toxic as any other area. I've seen Remnant Fellowship in action. I've seen the Gladstone movement in Cincinnati in action, and cults of every stripe and every size. For the past 30, 40 years of my ministerial life, I chose to be a pastor, and then God turned me and put me here. I've never understood that until moments like these when I realized, the perspective we gain from this shouldn't be just put on the shelf and forgotten. It needs to be made manifest. People need to be aware. And it's so mundane, tragically, so mundane, that people don't even pay attention to the outrages of the church anymore. So tonight, we're going to go ahead and hear more of this. And our time is going to document this by personal testimony of those who gathered who want to work on this a little more. And these bad survivors are not anonymous. I'm glad to hear that. Take your voices back. As was well said, speak the truth, even if your voice shakes a little, and gain back what you were torn away from. And it's to that point that I now turn over the remaining part of this. I thank you for the opportunity to share this, because we know that what's going to be happening in Xenos, they're simply going to turn their wagons around. And we're already in full fortress mode. They're in full denial. We all know this too well. It doesn't matter. The voices still need to speak. And I'm so grateful, and I'm honored, really, that I had a chance to help bring some of these voices to our blog and to some of our reporting. I'm going to be continuing to do more in what I can and discuss Xenos Well's activity. But right now, the rest of the time here, we turn over to you folks. And thank you once again for the opportunity. It's been an honor and a truly a humbling thing to be here. Thank you so much.
Thank you for serving us. So are there any specific questions that anyone has right off the top? And if not, I'd like to start with one. Where's Des? We're going to do a little polling situation. There are some things that are orthodox, definitely, in doctrine, but there are some really unorthodox things that happen in an outreach situation with Dwell and with Xenos. The thing that we talked about as a small group is that the only thing that seems to have changed over there is their name. So we want to make sure that you're aware of the practices, because the names can all be different and the same. So, who started smoking at church? Now, I'm going to allow you guys to participate too. Who started smoking at church? Okay, who had their first drink after supper? Who did shots after supper? You don't drink? Good on you. It's not unusual. Who is served alcohol like at an event? Underage. Yeah. Okay, so definitely there are some things that are like practices that are considered super normative there that you may or may not want your children to be involved with. And so whenever we don't have questions, I'm going to do these silly polls where I'm going to make you guys say, this isn't like church business as usual, These practices are a little bit weird. So, how many people were considered undateable? How many people were considered dateable? How many people have been married more than once? How many people married somebody that they didn't want to once they did? How many people got married within 3 months of being engaged? Who was under 25? Who was under 21? Who was under 20? Okay. So, I want you guys to ask any questions that you have of your panelists, otherwise I will loose them on you and you will be... John.
So, imagine...
And if you could ask it to me, I'll...
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Imagine let's say an OSU freshman who's suddenly being love bombed by Dwell. What would you say to this person?
Okay, an OSU freshman, what's that going to look like first? Anybody has any? Yes. The question was, so an OSU freshman comes in town, what's going to be their experience when a Dwell person comes up to them? How many have read stories like this on Reddit? Okay. Who can tell the story of what this is like? Sam?
I can speak on it because I have multiple friends who actually started in the church as college students as opposed to me who grew up in the church.
Okay.
And a large part of what they have said is that there's a lot of love bombing that happens initially. They both were not from the area, and so they didn't have a support, a group of people that they knew well. And so they experienced the love bombing, and then they were invited to an event. Sometimes these events were not explicitly said to be biblical in nature, Maybe there was a OSU football party, but then there's like church teaching going on in a minute after that. And so that's part of it. And then both of these people are also pressured pretty strongly to go live in one of the ministry houses that they have for their college students. And during that time, there was a lot of pressure put on them to spend all of their time doing Xenos-related activities. And because of this, their mental health declined. And when they reached out to people for help with their mental health, they were basically just stonewalled. They were not given any of that help. And it was basically, you need to pray more, you need to like focus on God more, and this will go away. That's not their experience. Once they left, then they found they had no friends that would still reach out to them. And they had to start all over again in finding a support system when they were at their lowest. So.
Anybody else want to take that?
I remember as a leader, my friend Jennifer and I, we had a kid in our group, his name was Jason. He had just moved into one of the dorms at OSU. And Jennifer and I went to visit him during like his freshman orientation. And I can remember she and I went up and down the hallways after we got in, introducing ourselves to everybody on the floor. I can even remember being as pushy as eating one kid's cookies to talk to him about his mom, who had made them and gave them to him as a present. This kind of manipulation and just looking for an end, even when a door is not even open, really is one of the things that's taught, things that's pressed. College kids are very susceptible, being in a new environment, being with new roommates, trying to figure out who they are, what they want to do with their lives. There's an enormous amount of pressure on them. And that's an avenue or an opportunity that we took full advantage of in whatever way we could. And at the time, it didn't even feel manipulative because we felt like we had something very, very important to offer. After all, we were part of the best community church in the nation, and we were part of a movement, and we were on the ground floor of something big. And the ends justify the means. Anything we could do to get a kid in the door, we did. Even going into the room and saying, "Oh man, like your mom, blah 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 blah. Let me try one of those. Oh, she seems really cool. Tell me more about her." And I was only a couple years older than that, but I was already taught how to insert myself into those sort of certain environments.
I wanted to say that while you were going on how college students are particularly susceptible to that type of relational reaching out and love bombing, I think it's a point that Xenos makes to target young adults and high schoolers and middle schoolers, specifically because they want to get involved with you before you have a full capacity to reasonably understand what they're saying and what they're doing, while you're still immature both intellectually and emotionally. And for me, growing up, I was actually best friends with founder Dennis McCallum's daughter, Jessie. And she and I were born 13 days apart. We were due on the same day, but she was 6 days early and I was 7 days late, which is pretty normal if you know me. Like born right into it. But one of the things that really shocked me as a young adult post-Xenos is that I had learned logic at Xenos, and there's a real pseudo-intellectual vibe that can kind of appeal to you before you really understand what reasoning is. And I was arguing politics once from like a slightly right of Attila the Hun position. And someone, it was actually a British friend, was like, "You're talking logical fallacy." I'm like, "No, I'm not. This is logic." And they're like, "No, This is the opposite of logic. This is logical fallacy. And it was the first time I heard that phrase. And they posted like a little link to like the 20 top logical fallacies. And I was intellectually sick for weeks because in my soul, I realized that I had been taught to reason the opposite of logically, while telling me with full confidence that I was doing it logically. And the dichotomy in my head, like, what did I believe about anything? Forget it, religion. What did I believe about anything that was not influenced by how they taught me to reason?
Yeah.
That I would automatically just build a worldview based around this design from calumet, smallest group, to be the opposite of what is truly critical thinking.
Any other?
I was going to say that the pressure is so intense for these members, and these college students, high school students, and middle schoolers are victims themselves. And if they fail at being a good evangelist, they will get a stigma for that. It's just, well, my shirt is the stigma.
Yeah, let's explain the shirt.
Yeah, okay. So this
Okay,
is...
can I do it?
Yeah.
I'm going to save it. Okay, so what is the thing that that Xenos most often Xenos Dwell calls you as someone who has left?
Disgruntled, ungodly, angry, bitter.
Okay, what else? What's your favorites? Go ahead.
Disgruntled and ungodly.
Not real Christian.
Not I'm saying. Hey, huge.
Oh, yeah. Not
Worldly of the world.
Fallen away.
I was told I never really accepted Christ.
Participating in satanic rituals
Reprobate.
at Vineyard.
Not committed.
Not committed.
One that has gone astray.
Gone astray. Backslider.
There were rumors after I left that I was a swinger.
Okay, so. I'm sorry. Bad mom. Oh. That's a good polling question. Who's a bad mom? Who had to go to mom class with somebody?
There was a mom class?
Hey, if you don't do it right, buddy, you get assigned to somebody. You got somebody. Who's the person? Who helped you?
That's for everything.
Oh, I was with someone helping learn how to clean.
Yeah.
How could you say that?
So here's another side question. I have a child who teaches middle school kids. I hope this is correct. How do I introduce doubts to them about Xenos or Dwell? They've altered all the plans that were ever for their future.
When I was in high school group and I was going to Epic, which is the summer camp they do for the high school children, my brother found the Xenos is a cult website. And I think, they have their structured, we are not a cult answer that they start teaching you from the moment you join. And I gave the spiel to my mom and it rolled off her back. We were good, we were in the clear. But then more stories come out, and more stories, and more stories. And sharing those stories, sharing things like this, sharing podcasts, that's the best way to introduce doubt. Because you see, it's not just me. It's not just my issues with the church. There's, 49 signs here? 50 if you count Julie. There's 500 of us in a Facebook group, and I know at least 10 people who aren't in that Facebook group. So sharing those stories, opening their eyes to the abuse is the only way that you're going to get that down.
I would agree with her. I would definitely use social media related things and the Reddit posts, etc., because, I was brought into Xenos at the age of 9 years old, so right before middle school. However, in middle school is when I really started to try and drag my friends in. We don't have to dress up for this church. Let's see, they cuss, they talk about adult topics. There's a big swing hanging from a tree that's really, really, really cool. You gotta come with me. And the guy that led the middle school CT, which was called SPAM at the time, was hysterical and very charismatic. And so absolutely it's really easy to reel in a middle schooler. But I would just be frank with him. I would just be brutally honest. And I mean, if I was a parent, I would say, no, you're not going. Here, hands down, no. So, yep.
This might go a little against the grain, but being born into Xenos kind of gave me a different perspective about what would have made me see what I didn't see sooner about this. And one of the things that allowed Xenos to shape my entire worldview is that I was never exposed to the world. I didn't go anywhere that wasn't with Xenos people. I didn't know people that weren't Xenos. I didn't know kids that weren't Xenos kids. I remember being so relieved when we moved into an apartment complex in 3rd grade and I finally met a kid who wasn't in Xenos and I could evangelism. I could get him. Finally. I've been praying about this for years. For years. I'm not exaggerating, that was for years. But I was already fully encompassed in the world is dangerous out there. The world is evil. The world is wicked. And I did not know the world outside of Columbus and the Outer Banks beach trips, which I was literally on the first couple of those that ever happened. I'm sorry, everyone. Get them out there to see the world, and more importantly, get them out there to visit other churches. Do you know what absolutely floored me? The first time I went to a Black praise and worship church. What? And then you hear, if not spoken directly about how other churches, you can't be sure of their salvation, but they wouldn't outright say it, they would imply that other churches' beliefs were inferior.
Yeah.
How many people who have attended Xenos or Dwell have been sent to another church to see how crappy they are?
So I would take them out there to not just experience other churches, get them out of the country, get them out of the city, get them into like a overseas, exchange program. You have to introduce the world to them that Xenos is specifically keeping out. And the more that you make those type of experiences church related, or we're just going to check this church out because we're on this, in this town for vacation. They're not going to connect that to what you're trying to do.
Yeah. Hang tight 1 second. Berger, if anyone wants to jump in. Go ahead, you're on.
I was was trying to text you. I was off, Pastor. Just a question. Just a question. One of the things that we are concerned about is that people understand Xenos to be what it is. It's an abusive church that actually functions more as an abusive cult. And cults typically develop themselves around the exaltation of a central figure and their truth. So my question is, to those of you who were raised in the church, at what age, at what point in your life did you really come to understand that the best example of Christian life that was known to Xenos was less to do with Jesus and more to do with Dennis McCallum or his elders or anyone else he set before you?
Hey. So, just a little, I didn't grow up in a church, but,
Right.
and this is all by the way, wrong way. But by the way people mimic everything Dennis did. As like a young man in the church, there was a certain style and a certain way that we would dress. There were certain mannerisms. There were certain ways that we would talk. Our inflection would change on certain syllables. Yeah, there's just so many eccentricities. Dennis picked up smoking a pipe. You know, it wasn't long until 15 people in his group.
Who smokes a pipe?
Dennis would try out all these different weight loss plans. Everybody would pick them up. So when it's less about the doctrine and more about the personality, that's when I shouldn't even say less about the doctrine. When it's less about the person of Jesus Christ and more about the personality of the person that's, purports to speak on behalf of this, on behalf of Christ, that's when you know you're kind of over your head. You're in a little bit of trouble.
What about your first meeting?
My first meeting with Dennis. My first meeting with Dennis. So I was 16 or 17. I was in the basement of 16th, and it was a college group, and I was so excited to be there. It was for the Super Bowl. They were having a party, and this is first time as like a high schooler I'd been on campus. I was hanging out with all of these cool kids that were smoking and drinking and cheering for I think it was the Patriots versus somebody. And I was downstairs on some beanbags, and I had no idea about football. My dad hated the NFL. He's Penn State fan. But I didn't know anything about football, but I was so excited to be there. And I was like, running my mouth and commenting on everything that was going on. And I heard a voice behind me say, "Would you just shut the fuck up?" And I looked behind myself, and it was Dennis. And I never talked to him. I never introduced myself, but I was so unbelievably shattered by this. I mean, I still remember, obviously. But that was the personality. That was the eccentric nature of his conduct. Dennis didn't have to be, personally empathetic. That was always Gary's job, right? Yeah. Dennis was, he could be outlandish and on the edge of, what societal norms were, and that was okay. He was, conducting himself as being bigger than life. And that kind of outburst was, the norm. That was my first experience with him. And I can remember I was there with my sister, and we were just mortified. Not only that an adult had talked to us that way, but the founder of this church that we were so flipping ecstatic to have been had somebody come pick us up and take us to this. I mean, I was a homeschool kid. I didn't get out. And here we had somebody who brought us there, and we were watching the Super Bowl, and it was, as extremely shocking, but that's what we got because the rules didn't apply to him, in that regard.
I can piggyback on that. It was almost the same way with the Delashmans as well. I mean, it was a little strange, my story was, because I was actually brought into the adult home churches very young at the age of 16. I did not attend any of the college home churches, et cetera, because I was quite mature for my age, and so the Delashmans were like, all right, come on in. But I started to notice eventually that it seemed like the Delashmans could do no wrong. Dennis could do no wrong. If there was somebody with status in the church that wronged you, they got away with it regardless of how wrong they were. And nothing you say could fix that. It was it was really, really difficult to bring stuff up about what the other members are doing eventually, because it's just like, oh well, this person is well respected. Screw you, And I almost kind of feel like being in the Delashman home church. I feel like the reason that my dad joined their home church was because it was for status. Oh, you're in Bev and Gary's home church. That is awesome. They were the founders of Xenos, at least one of them. And oh, you're in Bev and Gary's home church? Cool. You're in the McAllen home church? Cool. So one day I actually said something about it, and I was shot down rather quickly. It was not a very good experience, and that's when I realized I was like, I need to keep my mouth shut.
Can I go ahead, Sam, and then I'm gonna, I have like three more questions.
I really wanted to share on the thing about middle schoolers, and we kind of got moved past that. But
That's one we're coming back to.
Yeah, I grew up in the church. I think one of the most important things you can do is keep bringing back that middle schoolers' perspective to themselves. What do you want to do outside of what Xenos is saying? What do you want to do? Because God gives you your personality, your skills. You can listen to yourself. I was basically just told to do what was being pushed on me to the point where I didn't know who I was. And it's been really difficult as an adult, even thinking that I have the right to lead my own life because of how I was treated growing up. And I just wanted to share, too, that my parents would listen to tape teachings in the car when we were going on trips or anywhere, really. And I was listening when I was a kid. I was probably in third grade or younger. And I believe it was a dentist teaching. It was definitely an elder teaching, in which I remember there was a talking point where they're like, well, that's not real. Just like Santa Claus isn't real. And from the back seat, I'm like, so does that mean that the tooth fairy is not real too? And my parents laughed about it. It was a funny story for them to tell, going on. So that's how little I was respected as an individual person, because it was more about what could I do for the church, or how could I behave the way they wanted me to behave, and it was much less about what to say on what to say on me as a child growing. So I would just encourage a middle school child that they have a right to have opinions and thoughts and desires, and they should pursue them. That's the point of being alive, and that's what I would say to them. Anyway, the next question.
Here's a question that says, other than going door to door, was there a way to decide who you approach at school? Were there certain traits that you were told to look for?
So, they called it low-hanging fruit. And that was the kids with no friends. You actually don't want to reach out to them. No one should really pay them any mind. You want to go for the popular kids, because they're the ones who are going to bring more people. They're going to convince their friends to come. And I remember I actually led, Xenos is loosely affiliated with Fellowship of Christian Athletes. and I led in the branch at Linden Family, and my discipler or mentor explicitly said, these kids aren't going anywhere. They're not going to bring ministry to our group. We're basically just kind of hanging out with them. They're not worthy. And I grew up in Linden. And what does that mean for me? What does that mean for me, honestly?
They actually told me to bring in a lot of the foreign kids, particularly ones that did not come from a background of Christian faith, so I could evangelize them, and then maybe they'll bring their family members in, and then maybe that could set up some missionary opportunities down the line. So yeah.
I didn't get guidance on who to go seek out, but I remember from my earliest years the necessity of outreach. And Jesse and I went to preschool together, and just so you guys think I'm not just making stuff up, I've had a diagnosed photographic memory since I was 3 years old. I told my mom I was going to run away, and she said, how? And I told her 6 ways to get to my Aunt Lulu's house. So I really do remember things in great, extraordinary detail. And we learned about becoming a Christian and going to hell at the Grace Brethren preschool on Schrock Road. And as soon as I got out of preschool one afternoon, I insisted, one, that I become a Christian immediately. We were not going to wait for Daddy to come home from work. This needed to happen immediately. And as soon as it happened, I jumped up and I ran across our little apartment courtyard to my friend Molly's house. And I'm like, Molly, you have got to become a Christian or we won't be able to play Barbies in heaven. But I was dead serious. And my parents thought it was such a cute little story. But I was worried about her. It was not about the Barbies. I mean, it was kind of about the Barbies and kind of about playing Frog-a-Lot, but it was about us being separated that early on. And I was never without the knowledge or the self-judgment that I was not a good evangelist and I didn't have that personality, that I was doing it wrong. I was convinced that this is a result of, but my own personality was sinful because I was one of the more outcast kids. I was that picked on kid. So I was not a target for someone, and therefore investing in me, even at Xenos as a bona fide founder's kid, it wasn't worth it.
I just wanted to share about the fear what I knew about hell. So I actually was sent to the principal's office in first grade because my best friend's mom had asked the school to intervene and tell them to stop me from telling my best friend about hell and that she needed to accept Christ, because I was terrified that I was not going to be able to, go to heaven with my best friend. And it got that bad, and I was a first grader. So this is how intensely instilled in you it is that you need to evangelize people, they need to come to Christ, and Xenos' view of that, otherwise they're going to burn in hell. And I anxiety, I was truly terrified of that.
Yeah, absolutely. I can add on to that as well. I was terrified for all of my friends, even the ones that were Christian but going to another church. Why? Because Xenos is the only right way. That is the only right way. Everybody else is going to burn in hell. So absolutely, I invited pretty much all my friends who had to come to home church with me. Had to come to home church with me. One of my friends was Catholic. I'd rather, go to my church. I'm like, well, just check it out. Come on, But it's because I was convinced that any other denomination is going to burn in hell. So,
I have a quick comment.
Des, really quick, okay.
When I was in the high school group, I was 15, new convert. My dad died when I was 10.
they told me, because my family was Catholic and my father was Catholic, that my father was not in heaven. And because of this, I felt responsible for every person I met, salvation, every single person. If I met them and anywhere, I had to befriend them and make sure they go to heaven, so they won't go to hell like my father.
You had a question?
I just had a comment. They told us that we need to look for non-believers, not Christians, already Christians.
I just wanted to kind of go that the burning in hell fear that you're taught in preschool and grade school morphs as soon as you get to middle school into what I call the left behind end times fear. And again, this is like, something that my parents thought was kind of silly, but as soon as you start 6th grade, you start studying Xenos' like super obsessive interest in the end times and the rapture theology. And there are these super campy movies from the 70s that were called like A Thief in the Night. I hear some people chuckling if you've seen them. They're like A Thief in the Night and Left Behind and Mark of the Beast. And we watched these, and they were very careful to be like, so this is a Hollywood movie. We're not saying this is how it's going to be, but this is how it's going to be. And then we studied the book of Revelation with all of these images of like horror movie guillotine style things. And I think about it now and I'm like, oh God. But the 11-year-old me was traumatized. Honest to God, traumatized that this is what is about to happen to the world. And I must have prayed for my salvation every day for like 8-9 years because I was convinced there had to be some flaw in how I was doing it, and I wasn't going to get it. I was going to be left behind. I was going to get the guillotine.
Yeah, that's a good movie. I'm going to toss this question. It'll make sense here. The question is, we were always taught that Xenos is not a cult because they have plurality of leadership, each accountable to others. How did this work in practice? Were Dennis and Gary accountable for their sins?
Who wants to go first?
I think we could just... No.
Okay, well, maybe we can take the last question off.
Like, you can start at 78 and be like, 1978, no. 79, no. 80, no. 81, no. 82, no. 81.
So, in lieu of that, plurality of leadership is great as long as like you're not in an information silo. You're not like in the churn, in the circle. Believe in your own stuff.
I also feel like leaders were, because my parents became home church leaders, that was like, you get kind of fast-tracked at a certain point, especially if you marry someone in the church, to like start your own home church, because they want to grow, they want to grow, they want to grow. And so when you're like leaders like that, you're getting like monitored by other leaders, and there's like this environment where it's encouraged to point out other people's flaws, because then like you have one up on them, like you're doing a better job than they're doing. And so I feel like that's like, you can have multiple leaders, but if they're all kind of looking at each other waiting for them to slip up from like the dogma coming from the top, then it's not doing what it's supposed to do.
So they keep track of every wrong thing you've ever done. There are documents in their files as a church of any mistake you've made, even the smallest mistake you've made.
Back to kindergarten.
They will spread that like wildfire to everyone in your home church. And it's funny because that happens for literally everyone, and Dennis knows your every move, Gary knows your every move, but he's not accountable for his own actions.
No. And what I'd like to do, if I could, real quick, because we're down to 10 minutes left until we're gonna. I'm welcome all you guys that would like to be here. You're welcome to stay and have some pizza and enjoy a little bit of a rest before you head back out. I want to ask the question. Let's talk about what happens when you don't do what you're supposed to. This is where probably more of the issues come in. If you're non-compliant, if you're not somebody that is willing to go along, is willing to do what is expected. How many people have evangel dated? Where you date somebody because you're trying to reach out to them.
Flirt for Jesus.
Flirt to convert.
Flirt to convert, sorry. Wrong word. Flirt to convert, okay, good.
Oh, that's.
We know those types of things and we can kind of write some of those off, right? But when it comes to how many, and don't raise your hands, but how many people have had to confess very particular sexual sin in front of huge groups of people, and then if you didn't, someone did it for you? I really looked in the Bible. It doesn't say confess other people's sins. I checked it. So go ahead.
Related to sex. I felt that there were a couple of predators in my particular home church. And I felt like they got away with it because of so much shame. And I had that question. We know that cults attract people who are vulnerable, and that can attract predators. And did anyone else feel that they were preyed upon sexually by people that came into the church?
That's the question from the audience. Do you feel like you were preyed on, even sexually, by people in the church?
Well, they definitely prey on vulnerability, I will say that. I mean, you said what happens when you do something you're not supposed to. I'm going to say it depends on who you are. Because if it's Gary or Bev or Dennis McCallum or somebody fucking up, they'll overlook it. But the minute that you screw up, and particularly if you're not high up in the church or you have mental illness or something like that going on, it's like you could do the exact same thing they did and get excommunicated. Yep. It's very hypocritical.
Yeah, so just a quick note on this point. So somebody very close to me in my life dated one of Dennis's disciples. And she was, homeschooled like me and had no experience with anything physical. And when it happened to her, she was completely shocked and utterly humiliated and confused and didn't know how to articulate what was going on. And she got listed as a liar. And this man who Dennis discipled, I went to Dennis, this was after I left the church, and I went to him with all of the phone records of this man that Dennis was discipling, how he had reached out to her and was pursuing her, sometimes 70 text messages a day. And I said, Dennis, I don't care who you are, this is wrong that he's doing this to her, after things had happened and come to light. And he said, I'm not going to get involved in dating relationships. And that's a whole other panel discussion.
Right.
But I called this guy because I was an apostate at this point, right? I had no traction with the leaders. I was like, I better get some proof. So I called this leader that Dennis was discipling, and I got him on the phone, and he boasted to me about what he had done and how no one would believe me. And I take the flipping conversation. And I went to Dennis and Katie Downs and Ryan Lowry, and I said, I have this. And he said, I don't want to hear it. And he wouldn't listen. This man rose up in the ranks because Dennis had discipled him. He got married in the church. The woman that he had taken advantage of, was a whore, was undateable. was a liar. She went to one of the counselors in the church, and it was just a blessing that she had not derailed this man's great spiritual career. And this man got married in the church as a leader, and then went on to assault his wife's high school students before he was finally removed and kicked out of the church. And the thing that gets me is Dennis had a chance. And I would talk to him and say, I understand my standing, but I have these records. And it didn't matter. I'm gonna allow one more person to jump in really quick.
Hi, my name is Christy Bailey, and I'm not anonymous anymore. I was in Xenos from the year 2001 until 2015. I was made to be a villain the entire time I was in Xenos. I was never believed.
How many people were a liar?
Everything that came out of my mouth was disbelieved and not to be trusted. I was told that I wasn't good enough to be a mom. My husband's family, they tried to take my kids away because I wasn't obedient enough, because I had mental illness from trauma, from past relationships where I had been hit in the head by a miter saw, and I had undiagnosed traumatic brain injury. And I was made to give an account of my whole day for months on end by my discipler. Every minute of my day. And if I didn't, then I was not righteous in God. And I wasn't using my time appropriately. I wasn't to be trusted with discipleship. I moved from one group to another when I got married, and my discipler literally took my new discipler and said, don't give her ministry because she's not to be trusted. I fooled around with my husband, my soon-to-be husband, and I was chased around a house. Chased around a house by a woman screaming, you enjoyed it. Just say you enjoyed it. And then for months I was told I was a whore. While my fiance had 2 conversations. 2. Xenos is evil. Dwell is evil. They will corrupt children into thinking we are super fun, but at the same time, they will eat up every square moment of your time. They will take everything good. They will separate you from your family. And they will take your self-esteem and they will make you feel like you are nothing. I am 40 years old and I still don't know who the hell I am. But I am learning
Thank you for being anonymous.
I know I came late, but thank you.
It's not a punishment.
Thank you.
So, I want to end with this, and you can have a seat. Des abandoned you and made you sit in her spot. Here's the question. You know, we're told we're ungodly and reprobate and backslidden and non-Christian and Christian hating and of the devil. Jesus has been my homeboy since 1979. I've never stopped following Jesus. I'm not disgruntled nor ungodly, but I'm also not willing to let injustice continue to roll and not use what voice I do have in the time I have left in my life. And I would encourage you that listen to the hearts of those folks in addition to the things that they're saying. Because there's a belief that the reason that they're talking is because they're all what? Bitter, right? Are you bitter? That's the question.
No.
Closing round, one at a time.
No.
Jesus flipped tables. That's what this feels like. It is righteous anger.
Yes.
Not bitter.
Not bitter.
This is my life. Like, I'm an adult. This is finally my life to live. And I love my relationship with God. I'm not bitter about Xenos. In fact, I just want my dad to have what I have.
Yeah.
I'm not bitter. Kind of like you were saying, they did some horrible stuff to me. They literally ganged up on me, told me that me getting raped and strangled was my fault because I shouldn't be dressing a certain way, because I shouldn't have been hanging out with a guy by myself. I'm not bitter. That is wrong, and that should not be happening to anybody.
Exactly.
I'm definitely not bitter or even angry, like in a righteous sense. I feel more informed and resolved because I understand now, after years of therapy and understanding how cult techniques work, that the damage certain dogmas, for instance, the intensity of the purity culture at Xenos. I understand how these tactics damage people emotionally. And something, that I feel like Xenos has said is that, we acknowledge there were some bad things, but they were just, it was human behavior. It was individual sinner situations. What makes an error not a human error is when it's repeatable. When the same thing happens regardless of the parties and people involved. And that's what Xenos has been for over 50 years. It's a repetition of the same brokenness in people over and over again that didn't exist before. It is a systemic problem that's why it's not just a few disgruntled people. It isn't the individuals themselves necessarily. It is how they do their church.
Yes.
And I am resolved that is what I want to see them answer for.
Yep, absolutely.
That they, more than any other church I've known of, has put it into writing and documented in amazing detail how they want you to be a Christian, how they want you to disciple others, how they want you to outreach to kids. Have you read all of these essays in these books? It's not the individuals. It's the actual way they do Christianity.
Hard fall for these. I don't feel better And it's taken me a long time to get past the shame and the embarrassment and the feelings of failure and the feelings that I gave away the greatest gift God had ever given me, the church and the people in it. There's still nights where I'll get on Facebook and I'll, check up on my old friends. And this is after 20 years. I still have nightmares about just throwing something incalculable away. So it's not bitterness, it's a deep sorrow. But despite that, I feel very, very, very loved. And I feel loved because when I was living homeless in my car, I would find things that were beautiful. Like, I was very organized. Like, I know what you're saying when you say I don't know who I am anymore, right? I never figured out who I was. I didn't know until I lived in my car and had my own space that I was organized, that I liked art, that I liked reading stuff. It was the first time in my life that I had things of my own that I was proud of. And I felt loved by that because I felt like I was figuring something out. I was learning something. I was getting beyond what had occurred. I feel loved because I have an awesome wife and kids. And although it's very hard for me to step foot in a church, and my wife will go and she'll take the kids, and it's hard for me to pray with the kids at night and talk to them about God, and I feel like that door is closed to me. I don't ever for an instant feel like God has stopped loving me or blessing me. And it's unbelievable to sit here and to know that I was that failure that couldn't cut it, who was just at the bottom of his life, who was suicidal, who was living in his car, who had dropped out of school. And it was amazing to me that in those moments, to find something beautiful about life and to feel a sense of gratitude. And one of my favorite authors talks about gratitude as being just this otherworldly feeling because you don't know who to be grateful to. And it was an arrow that pointed me back to God on the other side of that. And even though I haven't looked back at that, He's not stopped what He said He was going to do for me. And I do feel love, and I don't feel deserving of it, and I don't know if I ever will, but I don't know if that's bad, because it's a humility and a deep appreciation of what I think that church lost a long time ago, right? So, I don't know.
Thank you. Not bitter, though.
Yeah.
Not bitter. Okay. You want to close?
I'm not bitter, I'm alarmed. Once I found out that I was in cops, I didn't realize it until I started reading all the stories on Xenos.com. So I'm alarmed for the children, students, the future people who are going to be broken like us. And if we don't let parents know, parents deserve a fighting chance with information. And so, yeah, I'm not bitter. I just don't want this to happen anymore.
Yes. We're going to continue and carry on with more conversation as we enjoy a late snack or dinner together. Thank you so much for your willingness to sit with us and to hear these stories. And we know that this is painful. If you go on the Blue Ocean Faith website tonight, tomorrow, and the next day, we'll be giving you some resources that you can check out. And there will be people that you can speak to as well. So you're not alone. We're better together, we found out. And it's funny, until we started comparing stories, we all thought we were alone.
Yeah.
So Pastor Ben, if you're in the hizzle, and John, we'll just let him pray us out if that's okay. I'm sorry, we're not going to sing any good Christian song for you guys. I know you were really looking forward to it.
Let us pray. God, thank you again for bringing us together in this space. Thank you for giving so much courage and grace to our panelists tonight, to all who shared, to all who sat through hearing what I imagine are similar stories for them. We pray for each one of us as we go forth from this place. Keep us safe. Guard us. Guard our experiences, both here and wherever we live. Lord, we pray and we repudiate the sins that have been committed by Xenos and Dwell, by churches around the world that have put barriers between we, your people, and you. We repudiate the sins that have kept us from being in community with each other and with you. And knowing that our salvation is in the cross upon which your Son came into this world to save us, we pray in his name.